I recently played through the game Dispatch, and it got me thinking about how protagonists in story driven games shape the structure of their narratives. What am I talking about? Well, I noticed a while ago, I think it was with The Witcher 3, that story driven games tend to follow one of two patterns when it comes to their protagonists. The first one is where you're playing an already established character, like Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher, and Robert Robertson III from Dispatch. This is where who your character is, how they behave, how they think, how they speak, all of that is predetermined, because they are an established character in the game's world. The second version is creating a custom character, where player choices determine what sort of person that character is. You can be anything: rude, funny, evil, good, gay, whatever you want, so long as the developers put it in the game. Okay, fine observation, but why does it matter? Good question. Uh, Me? Because with a predetermined protagonist, you have less permutations, which, in my experience, lead to a more cohesive and therefore more immersive narrative. After all, it's easier to get immersed into something if it doesn't constantly raise questions about the logic of what's happening. But why does it work that way? Well, if we can do anything we want, we can choose to help a group of orphans, then burn down a village full of innocent people, then unleash an evil demon upon the world, then put an end to a band of bandits terrorizing a small city, then kick a puppy, then save the same world from a zombie plague and the evil lich behind it. Who does that? How does that make sense? But the game developers wanted to give us the freedom to do all those things, so it's possible. And that's great, but at the same time it makes the game less coherent. Because how are my party members going to react to this, assuming a team-based RPG? How are other characters going to react? How's the game world going to react? Realistically, people might have something to say, some companions might be scripted to leave if we do something egregious, etc. But mostly it's just numbers that go up and down in the background, and if we reach a certain threshold, something changes. That's good, and it can be made to work surprisingly well, but it can't account for everything, especially when we go buck wild with our choices. Meanwhile, if we're playing a predetermined protagonist with an already set personality, we won't be given the option to make choices that character wouldn't make. This is very obvious in Dispatch, where you can sometimes choose how you want to be confrontational, but you don't get to choose to not be confrontational. And then it's pretty clear how the story continues. The result is a story that is better strung together and makes more sense. In a way, playing a protagonist with an already set personality allows the developers to tell a better story, because they can tie things together more easily, because there aren't that many permutations on the state of the world when the player is done with it. On the flip side, playing a character who is essentially a blank slate that we can fill with whatever personality we want, and where we can contradict ourselves as much as we want with our actions and choices, allows for a more free-form gameplay. I mean, imagine Skyrim if we couldn't go about and do whatever we damn well please, because John Skyrim wouldn't do that. Of course, there are games which do this particularly well or particularly badly. The end result is not as black and white as preset better story, fully customized better freedom, but it is a limitation on the game story. All of that is the mechanical part of the video game, what's actually happening in it. But there's another thing to consider, which in a way is more important, at least to me. I'm talking about the vibe of the game. Because if you've played the aforementioned The Witcher 3, you're probably thinking, but I did get to make a lot of different choices that led to different outcomes in that game, which is a sign of preset protagonists being done well. And maybe you've also played Baldur's Gate 3, and you're thinking, but I got to make my own custom character, and the game handled my wild choices remarkably well, which is an example of custom protagonist being done well. But there's still an important difference, and that's that in The Witcher 3, Geralt always talks like Geralt. Even if you get to choose what he says and does, he still says and does those things the way Geralt would. He always has the same personality, right? Or did you figure out a way to get Geralt to not hate portals? Meanwhile, in Baldur's Gate 3, you don't really have a backstory. Well, you kind of do if you're playing the Dark Urge or any of the companion characters as a main character, but if you create your own unique character, then your character doesn't really have a personality. You can't be nice with your particular brand of nasty or sarcastic or whatever. You can't choose the evil option and suffer PTSD because your character did not like doing that. An even better example is, if you play a warlock, there's literally no downside to that. Meanwhile, we look at Will, who's your companion warlock, and he's knee deep in all kinds of messed up trouble because he accepted a deal with the devil. You, on the other hand, who also accepted a deal with the devil at some point in your non-existent backstory, don't really get to deal with any of that. The immersion just fizzles when you consider that, at least for me. So yeah, I can do whatever I want. And maybe the game I'm playing was made by Larian, so the world and characters in it behave accordingly 99% of the time. But it still feels off, because my main character, the protagonist of the story, doesn't really feel like a character, but rather a vehicle for the player's choices. Which, when you let players make meaningful choices, that's always the case, but at the same time, Geralt never felt like anything other than Geralt. So there is a noticeable difference. Why does all that matter? Mostly, I just thought it was curious, but it can have an effect on the enjoyment you get from a game. Now that you know about this difference, you can use it to adjust your expectations from a game when you start playing. That way, you can be less upset when a game that lets you do whatever you want sometimes is not internally consistent or some small bits don't make sense, assuming here that the developers accounted for the big things. And you can also be extra impressed when that's not the case. The same goes for predetermined characters. Why am I only given the options to be mean in 3 different ways when I don't want to be mean? Well, that's the character you're playing in this game, and the story will likely be better for it. And when developers manage to let you feel complete freedom while also structuring the story around a predetermined protagonist, you can be extra impressed. I'm not sure there's anything to be done about the lacking personality in customized characters, but while that can't really be offset, it can also be done better or worse, and we can notice that and appreciate it when it's done well. It's a small thing, but hey, if it helps you enjoy gaming more, then that's all the better. Oh wait, should I ask people to subscribe and comment?